Over 7 million different animals inhabit our planet.
I, probably like many of our listeners, grew up with hummingbirds. My grandmother had many.
What can they teach us?
Okay. This is going to blow your mind. Okay. These birds consume 3 to 7 calories per day.
Many species are in crisis and need your help. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.
Welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
And I'm Angie.
Happy New Year 2019. Hello, Angie.
Hello, Chris. We made it. We've come a long way.
I know.
And we're still going. People are still listening. It's incredible.
I know. And this is our second episode of 2019 where we just covered sea turtles, but this is one helping propel us into the new year.
Yes, very exciting.
I'm excited. I'm excited for conservation. I'm excited for endangered species, looking forward into 2019. Angie, I just feel like we've covered a lot in the past year. I just have this feeling that the world is taking notice finally. I just have this feeling that we are.
I do. I think there's definitely an uprising and upsurgence of attentiveness, paying attention to things, what you're buying, what you're consuming, and where it's going, the animals involved in your community, and then, of course, endangered animals outside your community and how we can all help. I think it's going to be a good year, Chris, for conservation.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know why. Just Autumn Lindy just came into my head with the red wolves, what's going on with them in North Carolina. Just reading a story recently, and I know we got to get back to doing some news, but they were looking at maybe moving some to Arkansas to a reserve, which is really good. It's just stories like that. Like you and I are just checking the pulse in conservation and, keeping the news, and you and I on Facebook, we're constantly sharing stories together. So it's just looking ahead into the year. I think there's a lot of good stuff happening, but we need to keep fighting. We need to keep learning. We need to keep fighting.
Sure, we need to keep voting with our dollar and then also helping to drive political change, because that's where we're going to see the real movement. If communities start banning plastic bags, if communities start demanding more land for their wildlife, for their children, things like that, that's where the change happens. Is a lot of times, and a lot of communities, you have to have the policies in place to help promote that change. And I think people are going to hopefully start doing that, obviously here in the United States. And then also other countries are taking the forefront too and setting the bar high. And so I applaud those countries and those people in those countries that are also fighting hard every day for threatened and endangered species, and then also for a threatened environment. Right.
Yeah. And today, another wonderful species, hummingbirds. And this one, I think, we talked about it. We're just going to do a general on this bird because there's 328 known species. So there's huge. We didn't pick one specific one, but just wanted to, talk about the general species or family of hummingbirds, right? And just the hummingbirds, I think what is so fun, what's going to be fun today about these birds, how unique they are. They're incredible adaptations. And I just think they hold a special place in many hearts, that have been able to see them and just know about them.
Oh, yes, Chris. I, probably like many of our listeners, grew up with hummingbirds. My grandmother had many hummingbird feeders. And then my mom kind of took that on. And to this day, my boys love going to their Nana's house in the summers of Michigan to see hummingbirds. She's got them on both sides of her house, and she makes the best sugar water sauce ever. And we just watch them and watch their behavior and their interactions. And in Michigan, Southwest Michigan, we're lucky enough to get the ruby-throated hummingbirds. They come up that far. And they're so fun to watch, and they're just beautiful.
And it's like, it makes me want to be a birder. These ones make me want to go out.
But yeah, finally, Chris is on the bird nerd train. I love it.
It is fun. It is fun. They just, it's like, I want to go out and see these. And gosh, I wish I had a good camera besides my cell phone and take pictures of them because they're just gorgeous. These birds are gorgeous. They are small, colorful birds with iridescent feathers that are just wow. When you look at the pictures of these birds, you are going to be wowed. They're gorgeous.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time just flipping through the different images of all. Maybe I probably didn't look at images of all 328 species.
No.
However, that's on my bucket list this year. So
yes.
To read their names and just appreciate their beauty and their and basically the way their bills are designed and their colors and their size. It's just they're incredible.
Oh, they're beautiful. And so the word, they're called hummingbirds because one of the things, if you don't know, is they flap their wings so fast. And I mean, it sounds like they're humming, on average about 80 times per second.
That's incredible.
Second. One.
I'm like trying to picture me doing
80 times.
80 jumping jacks. And it would take me like minutes, like a lot of
yes. Oh, and it's just... They're adaptations.
I don't even think I can do one jumping jack per second. I mean,
no,
rough.
80 times per second. And that's just on average. It's up to 200 in some of the species. It's just, they're great. They're great. So they can fly right, left, up, down, backwards, upside down.
Like helicopters.
Yeah. And they hover.
Helicopters can't fly upside down, but they can hover.
No, there is one. Actually, there's a video of one that actually does a loop to loop, upside down. Yeah. It's a crazy helicopter. Yeah,
cool.
It's obviously it's a military helicopter, but I wouldn't want to be doing that. They hover, and the way they do it is their wings go in a figure 8 pattern. That is how they hover. It's just wow. They're just wow. On average, 3 to 5 inches in length. They're up to 13 centimeters. So there are some of the smallest birds on Earth. I mean, and you want to stick with us because at the end, I'm going to tell you the smallest hummingbird on Earth and the largest hummingbird on Earth. And it's going to blow you away how small they get. Like, it's just, oh my God, they're adorable. Other things about them, they have this really long beak that's tapered. I mean, really specialized to obtain the nectar that they need from long, narrow flowers. Another interesting thing, their feet are only for perching. They don't hop along the ground or walk like some birds do, that we've seen. Right. Just beautiful. And then they come in all sorts of different colors, right? Greens, blues, reds.
Oh, just iridescent, brilliant.
Yeah.
Oranges, greens, blues, purples, yellows. I mean, they're just...
And then boring, like white and brown. Yeah.
I know those poor ones. But yeah, we'll put some pictures up on our show notes to show you some of the more brilliant species or the species that we are highlighting this week.
Right. They're beautiful. Now, for our listeners around the world, unfortunately, hummingbirds are only narrowed to the Americas and the Caribbean. So they're not in Asia.
We do have a couple listeners in South and Central America.
A few. Yeah, a few.
Yeah. So that's where they're found in the Americas, but primarily Central and South America.
Right. That's where most of them, and even high up range, what I'm going to get to this, but there are even hummingbirds in the Andes Mountains up to 17,000 feet or 5,000 meters. Like, wow, they're up high. Yeah. They're great. They're great.
But I think you bring up a very important point is that they can be found in a variety of habitat. I mean, from basically arid scrub, desert oasis, coastal lands, coastal lowlands, tropical rainforest, pine forest, desert oasis, alpine tundra, and of course, high elevations. So the range is just really impeccable compared to some of the other species in the way that they are able to, as Chris previously mentioned, specialize in certain types of nectar to live, probably because there's so many different species and so they don't outcompete each other, right?
Oh, wait till I get to evolution. It's just, these birds are are great. I mean, they're amazing. They're amazing to study. You know, it's all like, you know, I know we love hoofstock and the large mammals, and if I had to pick a species of bird,
this is going to be the day, folks, that Chris turned into a bird nerd. I love it. I'm a huge fan of Central and South America. Let's go birding. Yeah. North America, we only get Chris, because we could go birding for hummingbirds here in North America, but there's really only about a couple dozen species, or less than that even, that venture as far in North America. And I've already spent a lot of time with the ruby-throated one growing up in Michigan. So, we need to, I think Central and South America is where it's at, my friend.
Costa Rica. Let's go to Costa Rica. I'm heading down there.
Costa Rica is one of my happy spots for sure. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I need to get down there. Now, the hummingbird, it's, you know, and these over 300 species, they are critical to biodiversity. And I want to explain a little bit why. The major thing they do, obviously with their feeding, and when we get to nutrition, we'll talk about how much they eat and what they eat, but they pollinate plants. Mm-hmm. So they're a native pollinator, right? It's not just the insects. These birds are playing a critical role in preserving our natural habitat.
Right. Yes, Chris, they're so important. And a lot of hummingbird species are the sole pollinator for several species of plants. In Brazil alone, hummingbirds pollinate 58 different plant species. 58.
Yeah.
So no more hummingbirds, no more of those plants. Maybe, and who knows, have we even tested all the benefits that those plants have? Maybe the cure of cancer is in that plant species somewhere. So now that's obviously a long stretch, but that's the kind of ecosystem role, big picture thinking, as far as getting rid of one species and the trickle down effect to how that can hinder several other species.
Yeah. And it's, you know, so this is what I kind of want to, you know, one of the soapboxes I was going to get on today, or one of the rabbit holes I went down.
Put your seatbelt on, folks, or fast forward this a little bit. No, just kidding.
No, do not fast forward. Do not fast forward. And it's the constant thing we talk about, and it's climate change, what's going on around the planet. And, you know, in our thinking, right? So you and I have covered 60 something species so far, and we've taken a global glimpse of different habitats, different environments. And we've seen how certain things are affecting certain species. You know, go to vaquita porpoise, and it's just the gill nets down there in the Gulf of California, destroying those animals and the key ecological role that they have. The Saola, the Sumatran rhino, you know, I'm thinking of Dr. Long, and the blue whales off New Zealand, just all these species that we've covered, right? In the natural world, in the last 300 million years, there is a normal evolution, you know, changing process, right? That is normal. It's normal for things to go extinct. It's normal for hummingbirds, a species like a hummingbird, going extinct slowly over thousands of years or millions of years, right? Now, with that being said, you know, the natural thing, rapid climate change, that is the worry. That is the scientific view that Angie and I have taken this past year plus that is harming species. It's when you have these hummingbirds with those 50 plus plants, if they go away really quickly, other species do not have time to adapt.
Correct.
And that is where you start seeing the dominoes start falling. So I looked at a couple papers. This one was really great. Garcia and others, it's multiple dimensions of climate change and their implications for biodiversity. Came out in Science in 2014. And I'm just going to quote them. Species with specialized climatic requirements are interacting with climatic events with narrow temporal distributions. So they're looking at what I'm just talking about, rapid climate change, and this shifts in distribution of climates, right? So we know the poles are getting warmer, right? So fish are migrating there, different species are migrating there, whereas the narwhal we just covered, the polar bear, the walrus, another one, they are moving further south, or I just think of the walrus coming to the beaches, right? Because there's no sea ice. and you're changing the distribution of where these animals are. Now, looking at this further, trying to wrap this up, and so it's not a 10-hour podcast. There's another paper that I kind of looked at. So that first one was looking at distribution of climate, how that affects species. Now let's look specifically at birds. This paper by Winker and Gibson, this was just published in 2018, and they're looking at broad-scale effects of recent and future climate change among migratory birds.
Okay.
And they argue that birds, so canary in the coal mine, everybody kind of understands that, right? They used to take canaries down in the coal mine with them. If the bird dropped dead, get the heck out, because there's no oxygen, there's gases, things like that. So in this paper, they argue that birds are long indicators of environmental health, right? They look at it because birds, due to their mobility, are the first ones to show change with changes in climate and distribution. So the thing is, birds are able to adapt quicker and move farther than, say, the naked mole rat, right? These tiny little rodents that are stuck in that one region of Africa.
Right. Very specialized. Yeah.
They can't migrate. They can't pick up and go, 100, 200 miles. They can go 100 feet, or 20 meters. Yeah. They can't go very far. So with birds, they're looking at birds, they're looking at their change in distribution. That is really giving scientists an indicator of environmental health. Now, I wanted to say this too, because Angie and I, we always try to take the scientific view. We're very skeptical, and we're not trying to be alarmists. But once these dominoes start to fall, a lot of species are going to go extinct too. That's the problem. And we're losing the vast biodiversity, not just a couple, not just 10 or 20. You're talking thousands, millions, especially when you start looking at insects and plants and things like that. Now, some species are going to survive. Some will. Roaches will survive, I'm sure.
Pigeons.
Pigeons will survive. There's certain species that will adapt and survive. The question is, will we? So it's a big thing. And I think with hummingbirds, it's another one that they can look at, because these things do migrate, and we're going to get there in a second. But if they start dying off, then we're in big trouble. We're in big trouble.
Well, Chris, I think that was a very good soapbox, and I appreciate it, and probably do most of our listeners. And for those of you that maybe didn't appreciate it, maybe it'll help get you thinking about some stuff. And although it's potentially somewhat doom and gloom, I think if we don't understand the dire consequences of climatic change, then we're not going to be moved to do things about it. And we're not going to be moved to force our politicians to do some things about it. And especially here in the United States, we have a big, large group of people that are kind of turning a blind eye on climatic issues and gutting our EPA and things like that, where I know in some of the European countries and Central and South American countries, they're actually making leaps and bounds to do things for the environment. And they're almost becoming more of the trendsetters compared to us here in the U.S. But for all of our listeners here in the U.S., make waves, vote with your dollar, email your. We're not going to be able to change perhaps the federal government at this point in time until we vote in 2020. However, we can talk to our local mayors and even our state senators and House representatives and governors more on a little bit more local scale. That's how change is going to have to be made. So that's why it's not all doom and gloom, because we're making ourselves aware and we're using science to help predict things and understand things. And I think, as Chris pointed out, the hummingbird or birds in general are very, very, very important indicators of the environment and overall climate change.
And it's like you and I, as scientists, we build credibility, right? And we take in the information, we analyze it, we weigh the evidence, and then we give our opinions or we restate it, right? I go back to Corbin Maxey and the trophy hunting debate that you and I had with him. Great episode. If you haven't listened to it, go back. We talk about trophy hunting and the so-called benefits to conservation. There are none, bottom line. But anyways, I mean, that's what
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. And that's the evidence that Angie and I looked at, besides we didn't take our personal views into consideration. We both abhor it, but we said, hey, if the money benefits conservation, then we would possibly support it because in the grand scheme of things, it's important. It's not. Trophy hunting is not. Zoos and aquariums. I have a good friend now that I talk to her all the time, and I'm trying to convince her not to use plastic straws anymore and talking about, some of these issues with, why zoos are important, things like that. We use, we look at the evidence, we weigh it, and then we state it. That's what we do on this podcast.
And my last reason to care, or why I care about a hummingbird, is because clearly Chris cares. So that is very exciting.
I care about every species.
No, I know, but you're turning into a bird nerd over hummingbirds.
Oh,
That's awesome.
I know.
They're incredible.
Say, me and Jesse Golden, he was working on me down there in New Zealand, and because that's all there is
Jesse,
birds down there,
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Yeah, he wanted to take me out and get me seasick, to look for the albatross. So hummingbirds, huge family. There's over 102 genera, 328 known species, just 9 distinct family groups. And it's just, listen to these.
That's one of the facts that blew my mind is I hadn't realized how many genres and or species there were. I mean, honestly, even though I love birds and I'm a wannabe bird nerd. Yeah. If you had asked me, I would have said, like 100. But that's not even close.
No, it's crazy. And listen to these names, these family names, the topazes, the hermits, the mangoes, the brilliants, the coquettes, the mountain gems, the bees, the emeralds. And then there's a single species group, the Patagonia. These are the giant hummingbirds. How do you not love them? I mean,
even the people that name hummingbirds are awesome, right?
Yeah, I know. They're beautiful. They're specialized. They're incredibly unique. Now, their evolution is a little bit interesting. They're related to the swifts. So that's really where they came out. Now this is what a big nerd I am, Angie. And I want to make you take this course, but I know you're too busy. But, Coursera, and I have the horse course, right? My horse course where I've had like 40, 50,000 students on it. So I enrolled in one, and it's dinosaurs and how they turned into birds.
I would love that. And my son Xander would, and he still wants to be a paleontologist. So that's right up his alley.
I'll send you the link. I'm going to take it. So I figure out, exactly how this happened, how they went from dinosaurs to birds.
I think that sounds awesome. And you can send me the course. And if I don't have time, that's why I
keep
won't. Around for my cliff notes. I call them my Chris notes, my cliff notes. Well, I would probably have more interest in just the bird biology end of things. I took a bird biology class, but I don't even want to tell you how many years ago it was, and would need definitely a refresher course in it.
Yeah, maybe I'll put the link up on the show notes. Coursera is awesome. Free college courses. I did one.
That'd be cool. You could maybe get a group of you and some of the listeners that have interest in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool one. There's animal behavior one that I took a couple years ago.
Coursera
it's really cool.
is incredible. I've taken a couple courses. Yeah, I think you had us do the animal behavior one. Yep. I think I took a statistics one before.
Cracked that whip on my grad students, but she's no longer a grad student. She's my colleague. So bird evolution, I will come back and give you more nerdy details there. Hummingbirds.
Yay! Stay tuned.
Over 40 million years ago in Eurasia, a bunch of species came out from swifts. Then a single common ancestor 22 million years ago, we can trace back to the 300 plus species of hummingbird we have today. What is so crazy about hummingbirds, and this is why, I got so excited about that, reading up on this, scientists that study this are just blown away at how quickly hummingbirds evolve. That even today, they're still evolving, and some predict, bar anything catastrophic, over the next million years, hummingbird species is probably going to double. So we'll have over 600 different species of hummingbird.
Wow.
It's really great. It's really great. Now, obviously, the early ancestors couldn't fly long distances over the oceans, so they migrated into the Americas over the land bridge between Alaska and now today Russia, over the Bering Strait. They came into North America. Then when they hit South America, they just exploded. The environment was perfect for them. And actually today, and this is what blows me away about these birds, 40% of all the species reside in the Andes mountain region. And scientists, again, are astonished about how these birds can survive like up to 17,000 feet or 5,000 meters. Because this one scientist, Dr. McGuire, said, this is the worst place in the world for a hummingbird to be. We're going to get into their metabolic rates, right? They have these super high metabolic rates. Oxygen availability is low.
Is low, yeah.
Yeah, and even the air's thinner. So like helicopters, you hear about these high mountain rescues. It's very dangerous for them to go up high because there's less air, less resistance. They can't hover. But here's these hummingbirds surviving just fine way up high. Just incredible. Now, the other really cool thing about their evolution that I really want to drive home with these birds is this idea of coevolution with plants. So scientists that study these guys, bless them, that hummingbirds actually drive the evolution of their own ecosystem. Because they're these pollinators and they go around, and so they'll proliferate the plants they need. And so while they're evolving, the plants are evolving right with them to optimize the environment for this one bird. So just you wrap your mind around it, you're just like, wow. That's what we're doing as humans. We're driving our own ecosystem, on Earth.
Right.
But these birds are doing it too. So.
Some would argue we should drive it more carefully.
Yes. But we've definitely had an impact. We definitely have. Now that's just kind of the evolution in a nutshell with them. But they are incredible adaptive animals. Now, on average, this is pretty interesting too. Being as small as they are, they live up to 12 years, 6 to 12 years, which is pretty long.
Right, Chris. And they've been known to survive up to 17 years living under human care.
Yeah.
So,
long time for a little bird. Long time for a little bird.
Yeah. And because there's so many of them, it's a little difficult to address their annual survival rates. But for the North American species, that handful of less than 24 or whatever, it's thought to be between like 30 and 45%.
The green violet ear hummingbird, which I would love to see, can fly up to 93 miles per hour or 150 kilometers per hour over short distances.
That's crazy.
It's just like zip. That is so fast. Oh, they're just... Oh, and we're going to get to nutrition, but they eat half their weight in sugar every day. The ruby-throated, one of the ones you were talking about, has the smallest number of feathers ever counted on any bird. Some other factoids. On average, hummingbirds need a meal every 15 minutes. Angie could do that. Could you imagine eating every 15 minutes? Oh my God.
Yes. That was me this whole holiday break, Chris.
Well, okay.
And John.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
He was brave enough to step on the scale this morning. Not so much. I'll give it a few days.
Oh, you walk like 10 miles a day.
I do. I actually I'm going for a run after this podcast because beautiful weather here in sunny Florida. So
I know.
But I won't be running. What'd you say? 90. How many kilometers or miles per hour?
93 miles per hour. Yeah, or 150 kilometers per hour. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely, no matter how much I run or no matter what I do, I can guarantee there's no way that my heart rate will be up to 1,000 or 1,200 beats per minute.
Per minute. Per minute. It's
I'll
the fastest
probably
heartbeat.
140 or 150 maybe. Yeah.
Oh, it's the fastest heartbeat in the animal kingdom. Like, that is insane. That's insane. I don't know. Does a drummer even beat a drum that much? No way. There's no way. 1,200 beats per minute? No way. Oh, just incredible. Their physiology is just nuts. How about this one, Angie? To conserve energy, so during the day, their body temperature is around 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 40.5 degrees Celsius. At night, to conserve energy, it drops to as low as 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius. Like,
sure. Yeah.
that is crazy.
And that's an adaptation that is not unique to them, but it's seen in some parts of the animal kingdom, but it's called Topor. Am I saying that right? And that's what they do. In order to save energy, they basically go into this Topor where their body temperature decreases, their heartbeat can go below 50 beats per minute, which for a human would be still really low. But, or not really low, but low. But for a hummingbird, that's incredible. I mean, you go from 1,200 beats a minute to 50 beats per minute. And most bird species are too large to use Topor to save energy because it would just take too long and too much energy to warm them back up. But hummingbirds, it can take as long as an hour to come out of Topor. So that way they can resume normal activity. It's eating every 15 minutes.
Oh, their biology. I mean, their biology. It's just their biology, how this all works is just amazing. Now, we talked about they can beat their wings.
So just for math people out there, that's about their metabolic rate drops to about 1/15
of what it is during the day. Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy.
I mean, you're beating your wings up to 200 times per second. Now, here's something really cool. Most hummingbirds migrate on average 500 miles or 800 kilometers per year. So these little birds are still going 500 miles. Like, that is not the state of California from top to bottom, I think is around 800 miles, but that's pretty far for a little bird. And this one I love, the Rufous hummingbird, I love that name, migrates 3,000 miles or 4,800 kilometers from Mexico to Alaska, where it breeds in the summer. Like,
yeah, that's what I was gonna. Yeah, so any of them that we have in North America, like the ruby-throated and several others, those are your migration champions. They're gonna be migrating into 3,000, sometimes even 5,000. 3,000 one way, or about 5,000 to 6,000 kilometers round trip. So
right.
They're not staying in Alaska that long because it gets cold and dark. So think about that, right? I mean,
I know.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's crazy they fly that far.
But they're smart, and before their migration, sometimes they'll increase their body weight up to 50% before they start this migration. So maybe that's what I'm doing. I with the holidays, eating every 15 minutes, I'm increasing my body weight for a migration that's going to come here in the future. I don't know where. It'll have to be made up. Maybe it'll be running stadiums or around the neighborhood. But yeah, yikes, huh?
Now, these birds do live a dangerous life. They, listen to this. So predators, they've been caught by dragonflies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That seems sad.
Yeah, I know. They've been trapped in spider webs, snatched by frogs, stuck in trees and thistles and things like that. And reading this, the one that really gets them is praying mantis will sometimes nab a hummingbird. So these little tiny hummingbirds. Yeah. Huh. And other birds, obviously will catch them. So it's a tough little life for these little birds, but they're pretty quick. So zip, zip, zip.
In talking about cool adaptations, geez, there's so many of them, but as you mentioned, they have a lot of flight adaptations, right? They can hover, go forward, backwards flight. Like,
I know.
That's incredible, right? And they have an incredibly fast wing beat and heartbeat, of course, to accompany their high metabolic rate during the day when they're flying around, collecting nectar. And a couple studies on Anna's hummingbirds looked at the birds' upstroke and downstrokes and reported that the birds produce 75% of their weight during the downstroke and about 25% on the upstroke. And so that's, like you had mentioned, that basically generates this figure eight motion that allows them to hover, which is pretty cool science stuff. I mentioned earlier about trying to picture me doing jumping jacks, like their wing beats, 70 or 80 per second, which is just ridiculous. And I'm thinking of doing jumping jacks or even just moving my arms up and down. And so if you take it a step further, besides flight adaptations, they have to have a lot of muscle adaptations, right? In order to be able to do that, you need muscles move bones, or I should more correctly say that skeletal muscle. There's 3 types of muscles. There's smooth, That's more surrounds organs and things like that. And then there's cardiac muscle, of course, that isn't found in your heart. And then there's skeletal muscle, and that's what moves bones and creates power and creates movement. And so hummingbirds have some really unique adaptations within their arm and or pectoral muscles to be able to do that. And first and foremost, the pectoris muscles pull the wings down, creating the forward motion of the bird. And the wings are raised by the suprachoroidal muscles, in which hummingbirds are particularly large. In fact, these suprachoroidal muscles, say that 10 times fast if you can. But just kidding, don't do it. They encompass 25 to 35% of a hummingbird's overall weight. And it's 10% more than any other flying bird, okay? Because in general, in birds, their pecs are going to be larger, right, to help power the wings. But in hummingbirds, they're a lot larger. And they're also unusual in that they contain red muscle fiber and no white fiber. So other birds have at least some of both fibers mixed in. And the red fibers are adapted for sustained use, while white muscle fibers allow for sudden, short bursts of energy. Okay. Then flightless birds, such as our chickens, right, that us carnivores consume, have only white fibers. So that's, I guess, a way to think about it, right? So chickens don't fly, only white fibers. Whereas on the far, far, far extreme, hummingbirds, only red fibers. And then most birds have mixed. So just really cool adaptations to help these birds hover and fly and flap their wings and sustain the muscle support to move the skeleton, to move the bones, the wing bones, and the shoulders and the sternum, and to move the bones that they need in order to fly, right?
Right.
In muscle fibers, all of us, for people too, it's similar. They have 3 sources of ATP. And for those of you that aren't familiar, ATP, adenotriphosphate, that's energy. That's important stuff, the stuff that actually helps move the muscle fibers. And for more on that, come see me at one of my lectures on muscles. I won't go too much in detail how the
all the
muscle,
cycles,
thick and thin filaments slide across each other and yada yada blah. But what I will say is that they need ATP or energy to do this. And so with muscle, there's 3 different sources of ATP. And some of them in humans at least, there's creatine phosphate. And then there's, of course, anaerobic without oxygen, glycolysis, and then aerobic with oxygen respiration. And in humans, that's one of the bigger ones that's going to help generate the most ATPs and most bang for the buck. And as you can imagine, due to the large amount of muscular movement needed to move the wings at 80 times per second, they're going to need a lot of ATP. Like, I'm not going to even do the math on it. So in hummingbirds, this ATP requirement is met by high rates of sugar and fatty acid oxidation. And this is made possible by high enzymatic flux capacities in these flight muscles that I was talking about, allowing hummingbirds to switch between fuels depending on what type of flight they're in and their flight behavior. So my guy that I've been talking about for the whole podcast, my ruby-throated hummingbird, when they're migrating across the Gulf of Mexico, they're going to rely on fatty acid oxidation to generate their ATPs. Mm-hmm. But they can also use glucose and other things when needed as a backup source. They've evolved muscle ATP, energy creating physiology, unique for their needs, whether their migration needs or their hovering. And it's pretty incredible. I think humans still have a lot to learn about it as far as how it's even possible.
It's, like I said, incredibly adapted. Now, while you were talking, I did look it up real quick. The fastest drummer in the world could drum as fast as 2,000 beats per minute, but that's no way sustained. There's no way that person could sustain that. That was just within 10 seconds of drumming as fast as they could. But if they could sustain it for a minute, it would be over 2,000. But that's neither here nor there. Now, how do you?
That though? Yeah. Is Is that
beats per minute.
Slower though?
No.
Hummingbird 80 times 60 is 2,400, right?
Yeah, no. Oh, well, through second. I mean, they're beating faster. So we're talking about heartbeats. Remember, 1,200 heartbeats per minute.
Right, but weren't wing beats?
Wing beats were like 200, up to 200 per second. Per second.
So
There's no way.
They still win.
They win. Like, yeah. I was saying like comparing it to the heartbeat, but still, if you hear the fastest drummer in the world, that is how fast a hummingbird's heart generally. Oh, it's way faster than that. It's like, it's yeah. Okay. So how do they do this? Yeah, there you go. So how do they do this? How do they maintain it? It's their diet. I mean, going into nutrition, because everything starts with nutrition, right? And you need the energy.
That's why I'm a nutrition fan.
Yes, and you need it. Now, their diet's mostly liquid or nectar, and obviously they're exercising while they're out collecting. So they need to sustain life. They need more calories than they burn. Now, I'm going to ask you, Angie. Here we go. Put you on the spot, nutrition dork.
Ooh, okay.
How many calories per day do you think a hummingbird consumes?
Oh, I didn't think you were going to go that way. I thought you were going to stick more with ATPs.
No.
Chris, that's incredible. Oh, I mean, well,
human needs 3,000, right? We need about 3,000 calories per day.
I think I'm like 1,500 a day.
Yeah.
But
2,500.
Allegedly 2,000, I think, for women. So a bird, but this bird is teeny, tiny.
Yeah. And they burn tons of energy.
Yeah, and they burn. They're like little furnaces. 10,000.
That's a big.
Oh man. Okay.
This is gonna blow your mind.
Okay.
These birds consume 3 to 7 calories per day. That's it. 3 to 7 calories per day.
I think I forgot to factor in the size difference.
yes, quite a difference.
I think I meant 10,000. Not
human
kilo, but no.
Okay,
like
millicalories. Yeah, microcalories.
Yeah, m calories a day.
Yeah. Now, if you put that into human terms, how many calories a day? Yeah,
all
okay.
Right.
So
I don't
human
know.
terms, you said 10,000.
I'll stick with my same guess, 10,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
155,000 calories a day.
Wow.
Is if we burned energy like a hummingbird, we would need that much. You're talking 100,000.
See, that's what I'm telling you. We need to learn from these little birds. There's like the best weight loss program ever in there.
How could you eat 155,000 calories a day?
Yeah, I don't even think you could. So we
it's over 70 times
into
more.
Like part of their physiology, their metabolism.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's only 3 to 7 calories per day, but it's in human terms, 155,000 calories a day.
Okay, yeah. I guess I was thinking more in human terms, but still, I would never have guessed that high. No way. Like you said, I can't, I can picture, I know like some of these weight builders, and there are some people out there that can eat 10,000 calories a day if they're trying to do like crazy, building of muscles or whatever. But 100,000 something? No way.
Yeah. It's crazy. Wow. It's crazy. So they go with their foraging behavior, and this would be good running into behavior, but people have observed them in the wild, like, hitting flowers 20 times a minute, and they just, go and sip and hover and feed and go to the next one. They have this really long split tongue that vacuums the nectar out of the flowers. And it's like
capillary action.
Right. And it says it has a flick rate of up to 13 licks per second. These things are super fast. And this website I was reading, I think it was San Diego Zoo. I don't remember which website it was I was reading. And they were saying, like, if you gave it a lollipop, it would just demolish it in seconds. Like, just done. So
I do the same, but I bite mine. I can never keep looking them. I always bite them.
No, they're incredibly adapted. They're just incredibly adapted.
When I was reading that they can drink their body mass a day of nectar.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, it's only, even though the calories are tiny in our terms, it's still a huge amount for them. It's just a huge amount for them to power this flight and power their bodies. Now, rolling into behavior, one thing, talking about them able to find these flowers and stuff, another thing these scientists are just astonished with them is their brain power. And how their brain is just compared to other birds. Their hippocampus is just so much larger than other birds, and that helps them remember. So the scientists postulate that helps them remember where the flowers are and which ones they've already eaten out of, and then which ones they haven't. So they'll be able to go and keep up finding that forage and that food. I mean, just crazy behaviors.
Right. So they're smart little birds, huh?
Yes, very. Not bird brain.
Not at all. Well, I think the more they're learning about birds in general, that their intelligence is a lot. Maybe it's not the common intelligence that we're used to seeing in humans or other higher primates, but that it is definitely there. In fact, like you said, in order to migrate and to remember where to go. So very specialized. With that being said, too, it's also noted that they're very curious and that they'll investigate brightly colored objects such as potential food sources. And they're active throughout the day with peak activity at dusk and dawn. So that's going to be a good time to be looking at your hummingbird feeders or out birding for them. And because of their high metabolic rate and the cost of this flight and all the energy it takes, a lot of hummingbirds, they'll spend about an average of 70% of their time actually perched and preening. So not always in flight because the flight is so costly. And in general, hummingbirds are solitary. Of course, males and females will come together during breeding season. And in many species, the males are very territorial and it's centered around a food source. And they will aggressively defend their territory. Females will set up territories too around their nesting sites, but they're not necessarily as aggressive as males, and they can move through each other's territories a little bit easier. But one of the coolest facts that I was learning about was hummingbird nests. It just blew my mind. I've never seen one, so that kind of got added to my bucket list of things to either be on the lookout for in the forests or just in general to go looking for a hummingbird nest, is that they build cup-like nests, and they won't really typically use bird houses. So unfortunately that one's out. There are companies that specialize in like Y or T-shaped perches that could potentially attract hummingbirds to make their cup nest there. But the female builds the nest entirely herself, and it's a cup or a semi-dome nest that will provide a lot of protection. And nests can be lower to the ground or really, really high up in the trees, which I'm assuming in Michigan, they must be pretty high up because I never really seen them lower down. Yeah. But they're also really well camouflaged with moss, dead leaves, lichen, bark, and they are, just really small. And because they're kind of like usually at a Y portion of a branch, you just might think it's part of the branch, right? Like branch growth, which is their goal, to camouflage it well because they're so little. But what I found super fascinating was that these nests take up to 5 to 10 days for the female to build. Sometimes they're reused, but often they're not, depending on the species. And the mother hummingbird will work on the nest for about 4 hours a day, making approximately 34 trips with different materials per hour, and then will complete it within 5 to 7 days, all while she's pregnant or having
and foraging too. Yeah.
While she's getting food and then also has eggs growing inside of her. And so, but yeah, the other fact that was super fun was that they use all this plant material, but they can sometimes use dryer lint or hair to make their nest, or cotton fluffs, but they glue together the nest with spider webs.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Isn't that cool? And so what they'll do, and I should have probably led with this to help out the audience visual, but in general, a hummingbird nest is like the size of a walnut shell.
That's tiny. It's tiny.
Super tiny, which, is, and it's about the diameter of a penny. And her eggs, when she deposits anywhere from like 1 to 3 in the nest, are about the size of pearls. So very, very, very tiny.
Eggs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So sorry to go off on that nest tangent. I just think, Chris, we'll have to put a couple pictures up in the show notes because, I mean, the pictures are awesome, but it doesn't really do justice to like the size, the actual like in real life size of them. And so I have more respect of why I haven't seen one when I was like climbing trees growing up or
there's no way. Yeah.
But now I know what to look for, darn it. So now hopefully maybe I will be able to find some nests.
And just thinking about it, it was like these little tiny nests, and I could just imagine those little nestlings and like how they first fly, things like that. You know, just everything about bird behavior is amazing. You know, like you're making me into a bird nerd. What about like how they communicate? You know,
Sure.
do they communicate like other birds?
They definitely do. I mean, we always talk about in bird biology, there's like songbirds. There's obviously a whole large group of types of birds. And although not technically a songbird in the songbird category of bird biology, hummingbirds, both male and females, have species specific calls. They're usually short, high pitched chirps, but some are more drawn out, some are more musical. And of course, the singing is used to attract males and deter intruders. And they can consist of chirps and squeaks and whistles and buzzes. And of course, these calls are used differently to communicate different things. Perhaps a mother to a fledgling to a mother, a male to a female. And what's really cool, Chris, is a study came out that showed that hummingbird songs originate from at least 7 specialized nuclei in the forebrain. We're talking once again about hummingbird and their brains. And nuclei is just a fancy word for a section of the brain of nervous tissue. But they have 7 specialized nuclei, and that this helps enable vocal learning. And in a genetics expression study, it was shown that these nuclei, these parts of the forebrain of the hummingbird, enable vocal learning. And what that is, that's the ability to acquire vocalizations through imitation. And it's actually only known to occur in parrots, which we are hopefully going to be covering this year, very soon.
Yeah.
And songbirds. And then a few groups of mammals, humans, whales, dolphins, and bats. So it really kind of helps.
Good company.
Yeah, good company, right? That's why you're so attracted to them, right? So just they're really cool. I mean, I think we're still learning a lot more about them and their abilities, but yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. But because hummingbirds are so cool, it's important to understand a little bit about how we make more hummingbirds. So I won't go into too much details because with bird biology, I could really go on and on and on about the courtship behavior of the males and the females and things like that. But just know that in general, a lot of male hummingbirds often have more elaborate ornamentation, such as elongated tail feathers and iridescent colors and crest. And they can be more colorful or more fancy than females, which I always think it's always like, I would love it if males could be the ones that wear makeup and fancy clothes in our society.
No.
Yes,
right, moving on.
It's like, why should women have to be all fancy for men? That's what in birds, it's the males that dress up and show off and do all this stuff. And I think we've lost a little bit of that in our human culture. So anyways, that's a different
We'll have to find this year, let's do another Birds of Paradise or something.
Or a peacock or something, right? I mean, oh my goodness. So, males, once again, will interact with females only to breed, and they provide no parental care. And they also, of course, don't assist in building the nest. So they're just there to look fancy and be fancy. But it's important because the males use their fancy looking selves and certain calls to attract females. And these iridescent plumage will help display dramatic flight. And so they will, a lot of hummingbird species, and the males are known for their spectacular flights that they perform in front of the females during their courtship, or if a male is intruding. And they'll fly up and dive like 30 meter dives towards the female and or an intruding male, and basically land at the bottom and do some kind of chirping and then go back up and ascend down. And they're just pretty dramatic. I couldn't find a YouTube video on it, but it's just, I've seen in other species that do this type of courtship behavior, and it's pretty impressive. And once the male scores a female, she likes him, she selects him based on his colors and his diving and courtship dance abilities, or not, I shouldn't say dance, more diving abilities. And once a male breeds a female, the female will lay 1 to 3 eggs in her little pearl-shaped eggs in her cute little walnut-sized cup-shaped nest. And on the eggs, she'll incubate them and sit on them or whatever for 6 to 19 days. And there's about a 48-hour interval between laying each egg. And nesting period is about 23 to 26 days. And of course, the hatchlings are born altricial, which what that means is they have no feathers, their eyes are closed, and they're really dependent on mom, right, for all of their food. And even after they fledge, so that's like when the little one leaves the nest, they'll be fed by the female for 18 to 25 days after they've left the nest, which goes to show that hummingbirds are really good moms. And that also that it's, important. It probably has to do, couldn't find a study on it, but it probably has to do a lot because they require so much energy in learning how to acquire the amount of nectar needed in order to live and sustain their flight and do what they need to do. So that might be why the mom helps supplement them for a little bit longer than probably other species of birds.
Angie, looking at conservation stats, I think it's surprising that 10% or 37 species of hummingbirds are threatened with extinction. Right. Wow, that's a big chunk of them. That is a big chunk. Some like the dusty star frontlet in Colombia, 50 to 250 left. The one that really got me is the turquoise throated puffleg, and this is in Ecuador and Colombia. Less than 50 left. They're critically endangered. So some of these species are really on the brink of extinction, and 10%. That's a ton. That's a huge chunk of population.
That's what we know for sure too, right? I think that 10% has some wiggle room to increase. Because of the ability to assess some of these populations and understand what's going on with them.
Right. And I think, I know we're hitting on the climate change. I think we really need to hit more on deforestation too in South America. So when we cover some more species down there, like the parrot, we can talk about how much acreage is lost every second. It's like, I don't know, 20 football fields or something. Every second is just lost, gone. Right. Forever, just bulldozed into the ground or burnt, dumping more carbon in the atmosphere. So yeah, that's where a lot of these animals, I look at it, Colombia, Mexico, Chile, Ecuador, Colombia. That's where a lot of these species are in crisis, in hummingbirds. So my question is, who's out there fighting for them?
They need us bird nerds or wannabe bird nerds to go down there and spend some of our money and on tourism and ecotourism and show them that that's the way.
Yeah, that's the way. Look for those nests in the Brazilian rainforest. Good luck.
I would love that so much.
Yeah. It's
so much fun.
Look, needle in a haystack. Geez. So who's out there fighting for these little birds?
Well, Chris, I'm glad you asked. First, I want to highlight today the American Bird Conservancy. They can be found, of course, on Facebook. They have a great presence there. And then also, this is an easy one to remember, abcbirds.org. abcbirds.org. And the American Bird Conservancy is dedicated to conserving birds and their habitats throughout the Americas. Okay. And they have an emphasis on achieving results and working in partnership. And they look at the greatest problems, aka climate change, deforestation, human encroachment, all those unfortunate things. They focus on those, the biggest problems facing birds today. And their mission is quite clear. It's to conserve birds and the native habitat across the Americas. In doing that, Chris, they benefit not only American birds, but all other species as well, like those plants in Brazil and things like that. So it's a trickle-down effect. And I highly recommend, we'll put, of course, their website up on our show notes, but I highly recommend you checking them out because they have a list of priority birds and they have a watch list. They have a bird of the week. They have conservation highlights where they talk about the threats, but they also talk about solutions. Yay, right? That's what we're here for, right? We know there's problems. So what are the solutions? And these are the bird specialists, researchers, educators, policymakers, all coming together to figure out how to best solve some of these bird problems. And I also chose American Bird Conservancy because they do focus on the hummingbird. For example, more than 200 species of hummingbirds find shelter or live in the over 70 reserves that are supported by the American Bird Conservancy across the Americas. And so 200 species, that's more than 50% of known hummingbirds. So the American Bird Conservancy allocates this land and works on saving at least 50% of the hummingbirds and trying to, right? So definitely give them a big shout out for that. And also their website's amazing. You can learn, I think you, Chris, when you put it up on the show notes, take a little spin through their website. It is gorgeous. And every week they highlight a different species of bird, and they have facts, and they have ways that you can help. It's a very informative, beautiful, beautiful website, and they focus on hummingbirds as well as many other species. So check out the abcbirds.org. And secondly, I want to focus on an organization that focuses on just hummingbirds, since that's what we were focused on today. And that is called the Hummingbird Society. And they can be found at www.hummingbirdssociety.org. They also have a great presence on Facebook, and they're very active. And their goal is to just teach people about hummingbirds in hopes that people will understand them better, of course, like them and care about them. And then because of course the Hummingbird Society knows that from understanding and caring about a species, you'll want to prevent them from becoming extinct. And they have they're one of the resources I used for the list of endangered hummingbirds. So that list is available on their website that can show you pictures and numbers of some of the more specific details than Chris and I are able to cover in this podcast regarding hummingbirds that are either endangered, critically endangered, threatened. So check them out, support them. They're a great group. If you like them on Facebook too, your news feed will be filled with beautiful pictures, and you'll kind of start to begin why Chris is
in love now with these
birds.
And especially these ones.
I also really want to give the Hummingbird Society a shout out too, because one of their mottos is it's an environmentalist quote by Baba Doom that I love, and it says, start quote, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. We will understand only what we are taught." I can't speak for everybody in the zoological industry or studying zoology or things like that, or conservation sciences, but that was a quote I read years ago that really helped motivate me to want to work with animals and help conserve them and teach about it, right? Like, it doesn't matter if I just conserve them. I've got to help people understand them so they love them as well. And that's what this whole podcast is about. That's what the Hummingbird Society is about, the American Bird Conservancy. So check all those groups out, like them on Facebook, and you will thank me later.
Yeah. And it's, they're amazing and amazing people out there, again, fighting for every species we cover. For our listeners in the Americas, and I'm sorry for our listeners in Europe and our listeners down in Australia and New Zealand and Asia, but for our listeners in the Americas,
India, and there's
Russia,
Africa,
Africa, South Africa.
Norway,
But for our listeners,
Sweden.
Yes, for our listeners that are in the Americas, here's some plants you can do to attract and feed hummingbirds. And I'm going to put the link in the show notes. It's from the Audubon Society, and some of the things that you could plant to attract them to your yard. Bee balm, honeysuckle, sages, obviously native flowers. You can put up nectar feeders. I'm going to put this in the show notes so you can, if you want to attract hummingbirds to your homes, your residence, here's some of the things you can do and help support these animals, and so they can get the energy they need to survive and thrive. So there you go. Conservation tip of the week.
Yes, and it's going to be Valentine's Day soon. And what a better way to tell the person you love or show the person you love than buying them a plant that will attract hummingbirds. Like, it doesn't get much better than that, cool. Right?
Yeah. All right, Angie, here's another quiz. How small do you think the smallest hummingbird is?
Oh, wow. I know I came across it in my reading, and I was taken back. It was it was some grams, and I know grams very well because from all my nutrition studies, measuring out feed supplements, and a gram is like very, very small amount of stuff on a scale. I don't know, like 5 or 6 grams, was it?
No. The smallest is 2 inches or 5 centimeters tall, and it's probably like 1.3 grams.
Whoa. Okay. Gosh.
It's called the bee hummingbird. It's 0.07 ounces, so you convert that to grams. Yeah, it's tiny. It's like 1.5 grams. Now, the biggest one is 9 inches, the giant hummingbird, and they're about 18 grams.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
2 inches.
2 inches.
2 inches.
That's so cute.
That's tiny. Oh my God. Little bee hummingbird. It's just, oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'll never find that nest. Right?
No. Oh my God. Oh, they're just, so cute. All right. So please send this podcast to a friend, rate and review if you haven't.
Please put those pictures on the show notes, Chris. I need to see that cute little hummingbird.
I know. The bee hummingbird is just, they're adorable.
Oh, yes. And
all right.
That is one of my last requests too, is that if you can rate and review us like on iTunes. I noticed that we haven't had any ratings or I guess a rating where you talk about us. That would be very helpful for anybody who listens on iTunes to give us 5, 6, 10 stars, however many are allowed.
Yes.
But then also put in 1 or 2 sentences on why you like the podcast, because I know there's obviously a lot of podcasts out there, and so it might help people that are surfing and looking for other animal podcasts. Your 1 or 2 nice sentences could potentially help direct them to our podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great. We appreciate it. And we're going to keep working hard. We have a whole slate this year. We're already like into February, March, planning and setting up interviews.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, we've got a lot coming. So thanks for sticking with us, and we'll talk to you in a few days.
Thank you, everyone.
Listen, learn, share. Join the movement at allcreaturespod.com.